Have you ever baked a dessert and before taking it out of the oven, you stick your fork into it to test whether or not it's ready to be taken out? Don't you hate it when there are only some parts of it that are cooked and others not so much? It's kind of like, dang, if this was all cooked evenly, it would be perfect, right? Well, that's kind of how I feel about My Hero Academia when it comes to Deku and Shigaraki. Feels at times like Shigaraki is more cooked than Deku. Shigaraki has undergone far more character development than Deku, and it begs the question why. The author has introduced various opportunities for Deku to undergo character development, and at times it almost seems like he's actually supposed to, but there's often very little to no impact on Deku as an individual. To clarify, I am not stating that Deku is exactly the same kid as he was in episode 1. Not at all. In fact, I think that he has changed significantly, especially when it comes to appearance, strength, strategy, and even a little bit of self-esteem, although I think that it can still use some work. My main point is that after season 1, Deku has experienced profound experiences that seem to offer little to no impact on his view on villains or his view on his own convictions. If Deku and Shigaraki are supposed to be going through parallel journeys, I think that Deku has some catching up to do. Before you jump down my throat, hear me out. Here are some examples that can offer you some insight on where I am coming from. Let's start with season 2. Deku and Shigaraki both encounter people who challenge their convictions, but only Shigaraki uses it as a jumping off point for him to take his aspirations more seriously. One example, Deku encounters people like Shinzo, who have been working and trying to become a hero for so long, but due to disadvantages with his quirk, or that his quirk presents him in terms of physical prowess, he has to work much harder than most. And then you have Todoroki, who wants to become a hero using his ice in order to prove to his father that he can be a great hero without his fire. Prior to these moments, Deku learns from Ochako that she wants to become a hero in order to help her parents financially, and he also hears from Ida, who wants to be like his brother and carry on the family tradition of being a hero. Obviously, Deku doesn't have to have reasons as profound as the others when it comes to being a hero. However, I think it's fair to say that this is a great opportunity for Deku's character development. This is an opportunity for him to challenge his own convictions, give his motivations a bit more thought. Wanting to become a hero because you want to save people with a smile and protect people from worrying about you is a bit too airy in my opinion. You can be a police officer and do these very same things, so there's nothing special about his motivations that can offer more insight on why he wants to risk his safety and livelihood in order to become a hero. On the other hand, when Shigaraki is faced with the same situation, he reacts a bit differently. Stain challenges Shigaraki on his childish motivations as it pertained to his desires to take down the Hero Society. Shigaraki did not have substantial reason as to why he wanted to bring down All Might, and at times the audience is left to wonder, what's his deal? Upon receiving the critique from Stain, Shigaraki initially becomes annoyed and decides to compete with Stain on who can get more media coverage by the end of the night. When not only Stain wins in terms of media coverage, but also in terms of societal impact, i.e. viral videos, the rise of the villain movement, etc., Shigaraki really has no choice but to confront his own childish motivations head on. Given his quirk, destroying things was simply something Shigaraki knew how to do really well, but he wasn't doing it with the intention to change society in any way, at least not in the beginning. By the end of season 2, however, Shigaraki understands his convictions and comes to the realization that taking down All Might was important not only because he held deep resentment for him already, probably having to do with the fact that maybe he needed All Might to save him at one point and All Might was not able to come, but because he felt like All Might's symbolism caused people to walk around oblivious about society at large and oblivious to the fact that sometimes there are people who even All Might cannot save. Ultimately, it was Shigaraki that challenged his own way of thinking and accepted that he needed to change the way he moved going forward and is seen in his future plans, especially when it comes to the training camp. I think he was successful in proving to the aspiring heroes and these students that without the protection of a hero, their lives are at really great risk. And a lot of times a hero is not going to have the time, or, you know, they're not going to be able to come out and save you. And the result of that is really, really tragic. You can get hurt really bad, and that's exactly what happened. Deku, however, does not seem to challenge his own motivations and allow it to drive him to change the way he moved. While Shigaraki's motives were initially rooted in his disdain for All Might, he was able to rationalize why All Might was detrimental to society at large and make that his conviction. On the other hand, while Deku's motivations are rooted in his love for All Might, to me, it feels like he has not made any connections to how All Might has changed society at large to his own motivations to becoming a hero, past wanting to save people with a smile. And don't get me wrong, there are moments, and this is why I say that I feel like a lot of these scenes are supposed to provide Deku with some character development, because I do remember when he faced off with Shinzo and he understood his reasonings for wanting to become a hero, he did do a bit of brief reflection on, wow, the kids around me have real convictions, they have real reasons as to be a hero. Meanwhile, my reasons seem it doesn't seem to hold as much weight in comparison to them. But he pretty much brushes it off. And not that that's an issue, but I think that it was definitely an opportunity for him to become a more dynamic main character. Next example is season 3. Both Deku and Shigaraki lose their mentors in some way, right? We see that All For One, which is Shigaraki's mentor, he's sent to jail and he's no longer a present figure, or as present as he could have been, as he was before. And All Might retires, so Deku is forced to fill his shoes. Both Shigaraki and Deku are forced to rise up to the occasion and fill the shoes of their mentors. Shigaraki rises to the occasion by beefing up the League of Villains, while Deku does not much. That's pretty much all I have to say in that regard. I just felt like Shigaraki made plans to recruit more people into the League of Villains, which is why twice recruited Chisaki, and Chisaki ended up meeting Shigaraki in the League at first. Obviously, we know that that blows up in their face, and I'm gonna get to that in the next example, but I felt like in season 3, outside of the licensing exam, there wasn't really much opportunity for Deku to undergo even remotely the same amount of character development. Yes, there are moments in the exam where he's left by himself. In fact, it almost seems like Deku does try to become more of a leader. When they first enter the licensing exam, he tells the class, hey, let's stick together, but that also falls flat. Everybody decides, well, not everybody, but you see Bakugo go out on his own, and then you see Bakugo's clique go with him, and then you see Todoroki also go off on his own. So he wasn't able to capture, I don't want to say obedience, but he wasn't able to capture the respect of all of his classmates in that regard, while Shigaraki is able to do that with very little issue. And I think that All For One is interesting, and maybe this will be a different video, but I think it's interesting that All For One was able to better prepare Shigaraki for society at large than All Might was or is able to prepare Deku. Not All Might, but All For One, he is totally understanding and invites Shigaraki to make more mistakes, because every mistake he'll make is a learning opportunity, and he's just like, you can start all over again, I'm always here for you. And he also understands that even in his absence, it will only serve to catapult Shigaraki to greater heights, because his resentment will grow and therefore his convictions will as well. Deku, it seems like, doesn't really have the opportunity to learn how to swim on his own and be just thrown into situations and have him kind of wing it. And I'm gonna get into that during season 4, because I feel like this represented itself in season 4. So in season 4, Shigaraki is confronted by Chisaki on his lack of organization and leadership when it comes to the league, and threatens his standing. Deku was confronted by Night Eye on his lack of experience and assertiveness, and states that he does not deserve to have One For All, and that Mirio does instead. So his position is also threatened. Shigaraki draws closer to his competition in order to learn from him, adopt his skills, and ultimately eliminates his competition after everything is well and done. Deku, on the other hand, may have been triumphant against Chisaki, but one can argue that his opportunity to learn skills that he can carry forward with him past the internship was stripped from him once he was able to depend on Eri. So again, that explains what I was talking about, and where I feel like in the opportunities that Deku has to really learn how to deal with situations on his own, people often offer him a safety net, and I don't think that's to his advantage. I think that it only allows Shigaraki to continue to gain an advantage over him. I also want to just go back and touch back on the Stain situation in season 2, because I feel like Stain should have impacted Deku just as much as he did Shigaraki, but there was no real sign of that. Realistically, I think it would have been an interesting character development opportunity. I think it could have looked like something like Deku getting to learn whether or not his classmates felt there was any downsides to the Hero Society. Because when you think about Stain, anyone in his classroom has the potential to be a Stain. Stain was once sitting in his seat, aspiring to be the same thing he was, and realistically, anyone in his class can be the next Stain. And I think it would have been interesting to get insight, or for him to gain insight from his classmates on what they felt the Hero Society needed to improve on, and maybe aspire to not only accepting the Hero Society as it is presented to him, but also wanting to continue to improve it. And I don't know, I just feel like these opportunities were missed opportunities. And don't get me wrong, I'm not an author, I'm not a mangaka, I'm not an illustrator. I can't possibly imagine how much work goes into keeping up a series like this. I love My Hero Academia, it's a great series. I'm not criticizing the series at large. I'm only really offering a different perspective in terms of Deku, because what I've come to realize is that there's been growing frustrations, or at least apathy. Yeah, apathetic attitudes towards Deku. People don't care for him as the main character, and I think that it's not too late to change people's sentiments about Deku, because I like him as the main character. I had a conversation with my brother about why I thought Deku was really, really unique. I've been reading and watching anime since I was very young, and I don't think I've ever seen a main character like Deku who has freckles, starts off really scrawny, he's nerdy, he's an otaku, and he is the one who's going to be the greatest hero. And that's just really unique, and I'm very excited to see where it goes. But I do think that it'd be interesting to see Deku become a more dynamic character, if that makes sense. Another example was when Deku faced off with La Gentle. La Gentle was another example of how villains can come in various forms, some with less harmful intent than others. La Gentle was someone who was shunned after his attempt to save someone ended tragically. While that was messed up and understandably controversial, did he deserve to be shunned the way he was? That's debatable, right? He also encounters a hero that refused to acknowledge him and looked down on him because he didn't have as much clout as he did. It would have been interesting to see Deku question to what extent heroes themselves play a role or are responsible for the villain crisis. That would have been a really interesting, subject matter to delve into, and maybe the author has plans to do that. I don't know, but I think it would have, contributed to making Deku a far more dynamic character. Again, Deku does have moments where he gives these situations some brief thought, but they only seem to impact him or change the way he looks at society going forward in a obvious way in that very moment, but not going forward after that. It's almost like at times it never happened. So we've come to that point in the video where there's a bit of manga spoilers. So I'm gonna put an alert here to let you know manga spoilers are here. I'm going to try and keep it brief, but the basis of what I wanted to point out in the manga that I thought was very interesting was that while Shigaraki appreciates everything All For One has taught him and done for him, he does not aspire to be just like him. He wants to become even better than him. He rejects his control over his body and fights for his own autonomy. Deku, on the other hand, yields to the previous users of One For All and allows them to take over the driving seat. This is not at all bad. In fact, I think it's fair play given that Shigaraki at the time has since, adopted more quirks. So it's only fair that Deku can tap into the previous users and their quirks in order to, leverage it, right? But I will say that I was pretty shocked to see that Shigaraki demonstrate something I longed and hoped to see present itself in Deku: individuality. I've always wanted to see Deku exhibit the ability to see himself as a hero outside of the context of All Might. Not sure if this has happened yet, or that has happened yet. I mean, I've read everything and watched every episode, but I don't think I've ever seen a moment where Deku is like, I don't want to be the next All Might. I want to be even better than All Might. I want to go farther than All Might. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. I honestly think that if there's anyone who is looking at things through that lens is actually Bakugo. Bakugo is the one who's aspiring to take it even further. And I think that is interesting dynamic. But essentially, that's the gist of this video. I'm not trying to dog on My Hero. I think it's a great series. I think its success speaks for itself. And I think Horikoshi is an amazing mangaka. I think he's doing a phenomenal job. I just wanted to address some of the growing sentiments I see surrounding Deku as the main character. I mean, there are literal Reddit pages dedicated to dogging on Deku as the main character. And I've even seen YouTube videos from huge creators in the anime sphere also criticizing Deku and saying that he's a trash MC. And while to some extent I will say that I think some of the criticism are a bit unbalanced and unreasonable, only because I did see that a lot of people compare Deku to Mirio, and to me I think it's honestly unfair for Deku to be compared to Mirio or anybody at that, because Deku, he got his quirk much later. Most kids got their quirk by 6 years old. Deku didn't get his quirk until he got into high school. He was years behind the rest of his colleagues and the rest of his classmates, and they've gotten a plethora of more time to get used to their quirk. I mean, if you want to even compare Mirio's upbringing to Deku, Mirio not only had a father figure, but he had a father figure who had the same quirk as him and who was able to help and teach him and coach him on how to use his quirk. His quirk is very difficult to use and manage, and a lot of this, you cannot take that away from Mirio, that he was able to make a lot of use out of a quirk that could have easily made him turn away from being a hero. And I think Mirio is honestly one of my favorite characters. I love him too, but I think that it's a false equivalency. That's essentially what I'm saying. I think that comparing the two is like comparing apples and oranges, not to mention that Mirio is literally a third year while Deku is a first year. So even on top of that, even if Deku had a quirk his whole life up until that point, Mirio still has 2 years on him. So they're not at the same place, and they never will be. I think that when Deku becomes a third year, I think that's when you can start making comparisons to how Mirio was when he was a third year. But until that point, I think a lot of this is like premature. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. Please let me know what you think. I'm excited to hear your thoughts. Like, share, subscribe. I have so many more interesting videos coming up. You'll regret it if you don't subscribe. I'm joking. But again, thank you so much for watching this video. I'll catch up with you guys later. Bye.